Welcome to the LDN radio show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Jenn from Canada, who's going to share with us her MCAS, EDS and POT story, and hopefully she will share some of her experience of LDN on a medical professional basis. So thank you for joining us today, Jenn.
So nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So when did your triad journey first start? I mean, did you have it as a child or as a teen?
Yeah, looking back, I'm very certain it started from quite a young age. Honestly, my earliest memories include what I would now describe as disautonomia symptoms. Like I remember being in like kindergarten, grade 1, and like the pages of paper I was writing and drawing on would get smeared because my hands were always cold and clammy. I remember fainting, passing out for the first time in kindergarten and needing to be sent home for that. So like dysautonomia is what showed up first for me. And then probably around age 9 or 10 is when I first started dislocating. So I have a long history of what was likely hypermobile EDS that started at a young age. And multiple surgeries, tons of dislocations, multiple joints. And then what I think, looking back, is that the MCAS symptoms first started showing up probably around the time of puberty, lots of allergic type symptoms. And I do believe we had a mold exposure in my teen years, which ramped up quite a bit of things. But then kind of around the age of 18, 19, basically every single year, I'd wind up in the hospital for some mystery illness that no one could explain. One year it was like 6 rounds of pneumonia in 8 months. One year it was an autoimmune hepatitis where I was yellow from head to toe and my liver enzymes were through the roof. One year it was my kidneys going into failure. One year it was bladder urinary symptoms. So kind of now looking back, that sounds fairly classic, the multi-system inflammatory disorder that waxes and wanes and changes forms. But yeah, so I think going back quite far, the symptoms started quite a bit earlier than I was diagnosed. I was only diagnosed, I'd say, 2 years ago with MCAS. We had a very, very significant mold exposure in our former home. It was hidden, it wasn't obvious, and basically the whole family started getting sicker and sicker. And I'm quite a researcher. I'm very deep in the medical and the holistic alternative communities. I am a researcher, and it did not make sense to me why all of us were getting incredibly, incredibly sick despite excellent treatments and all of the alternative therapies as well. And so eventually we found hidden mold, and the MCAS symptoms started to ramp up significantly. Later that year, I got in to see an allergist, and I think I was quite lucky. I ended up getting a positive on the 24-hour urine test. And so I was diagnosed by an allergist with MCAS. And then, basically we had a number of months of trying to figure out a cocktail that would work for me. We ended up moving, and the allergist kind of fell on the back burner a bit. And my nurse practitioner, who was actually quite a strong advocate, even while she didn't know what was going on, she did a peer-to-peer with Dr. Afrin, actually. And so she had a conversation with him on the phone and received his info package for practitioners. And she did say it included low-dose naltrexone. And it was something I'd been asking her about because my joint pain symptoms were very uncontrolled. It felt like we were chatting about earlier. Some of it felt like osteoarthritis, like with the dislocations, there's going to be a lot of wear and tear on the joints, but some of the pain really felt what I would describe as autoimmune. So like the small joints in the hands and the feet, like constantly blowing up and going down, and like chronic headaches, and basically a lot of pain that wasn't present prior to the MCAS blowing up. So I'd asked her about LDN. She said she would chat with Dr. Afrin and look through the package, and she saw LDN in there. And so she started me on LDN, and I had to start quite low. I think I started at about 2.0, I would say, and we had to increase it very incrementally. But I noticed a difference probably within 3 to 4 days. It was fascinating. So the first thing that I remember decreasing was headaches, and it was, I would say it was not the classic migraine headache where you have the aura and you're down for days, but it was just a chronic headache at about 6 out of 10 that would just be there all the time. And you'd wake up with it, you'd go to bed with it. The headache started to decrease really, really quickly, which was surprising because that wasn't something I was looking for the LDN, but that went first. Probably the sleep is what I noticed next. Also, something else that I wasn't expecting. I was having horrible sleeps. Quite a lot of what I would assume is the histamine dumping symptoms at night, where you can fall asleep, but you keep waking up over and over. You can't stay asleep. That kind of classic 2 a.m. till 5 a.m. I'd be just in and out all throughout there, but the sleep improved dramatically and quite quickly. That was definitely within the first week. And then joint pain, and that was something I was very delighted with and that I was hoping would happen. The joint pain, and particularly what I would call the autoimmune type pain, where it's just different. You can't get comfortable. It's the heat, the ice, the NSAIDs don't really touch it in the same way as the kind of more osteoarthritis pain, and the pain started to go down. And I think, I'm not entirely sure when the sweet spot was. I got up to 4.5, and I would certainly say that was a very good range for me. We're experimenting with going a little bit higher. I'm not sure if everyone does that, but right now I'm at about 5.5. But yeah, those were the 3 symptoms that were very noticeable, and it was all quite quick that it showed up for me.
Mm-hmm. What other symptoms were you experiencing before you started LDN and your other treatments?
Massive GI component. That's been kind of the case, I honestly, as early as I can remember. Initially, it was IBS type symptoms, but like tons and tons and tons of abdominal bloating, like up to the point where it was matching my month 8 belly. When I was pregnant, I would get that swollen after eating. Sodium cromolyn was a major game changer for that. But I will say a massive GI component. There was the flushing, there was the hives, there was the chronic pain. I never went into the full anaphylaxis needing the EpiPen, but constant, like the throat closing and like breathing getting a little bit more difficult. And yeah, I would say those were the main symptoms. Sometimes angioedema as well. And I also found it quite interesting with my other family members who are on LDN too. I also find it quite fascinating that our symptoms, which like not everyone had the same symptoms, and LDN did different things in different people, which I found also quite fascinating to watch. My husband and my 2 children were also started on LDN by a different practitioner, a naturopathic doctor here in BC, a wonderful naturopathic doctor. And yeah, all 3 of them are at different doses, and they've had very different symptom relief with the LDN.
But a success for you all.
Oh, like massive. I'm kind of almost an evangelist about it because like the difference it's made has been huge. And like when your 3-year-old, my 3-year-old also, she's being treated for mast cell activation syndrome and potentially PANS as well. When your 3-year-old comes and tells you, my belly doesn't hurt, mama, and every single day, tons of times a day, my belly hurts, my head hurts, mama. And to have that go away, like shocking, absolutely shocking. And like, you can't fake that. It's a 3-year-old, right?
Wow. Oh, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And what about fatigue? Was that an issue for you?
Massive issue. I do still have a component of chronic fatigue syndrome, but absolutely LDN did help with that. I don't know entirely if it's the autoimmune effect entirely reducing chronic fatigue or if it was just that I was sleeping better, but certainly like the chronic fatigue would have had me in bed for at least 6 to 8 hours outside of nighttime sleep hours. So like I was really down for the count around 2 years ago. And I can't say entirely what was LDN, but I am no longer in bed 6 to 8 hours a day outside of waking hours. And the fatigue, while it is still there, it is absolutely reduced. And I'm certain that LDN was a big component to that.
Mm-hmm. So professionally, give us your experience.
Yeah, totally. Well, at the beginning, I was mentioning like I have a personal interest, but also a professional interest in this as well. I'm a physiotherapist, and my career, I don't think I went into my career deciding to go into this, but you know how kind of life brings things your way, and what you experience, I think, kind of ends up reflecting back to you a bit. But I've ended up specializing in the complex chronic pain patient. And part of my very in-depth screening process, it obviously includes going over patients' medications. And I'm an avid researcher, and I'd say for probably in between 5 and 10 years, I was aware of LDN because I work with chronic pain patients. I've certainly heard of LDN as something used for chronic pain, albeit more autoimmune type of pain. However, it's been on my radar, and I found it quite interesting that I really don't think in the thousands of clients that I've seen, I never remember once seeing a patient who was on this medication. So it was definitely in the back of my mind. I'm always searching for new pieces to explore, and like, okay, well, we've tried this, this, and this, and this, and this, and it's not working. So what else is there? What else can you ask your doctor about? What can we look at in the functional medicine realms? And so LDN piqued my interest there because from what research I can go over, it sounds very safe. It sounds like the benefits can be pretty extreme when they work. And kind of as we were chatting about earlier, I really think there is a component to a lot of patients' pain and their arthritis and their joint wear and tear. Like, I think there's a lot of patients that have been missed in the autoimmune sector. Like, I look back at hundreds potentially of patients that I've treated, and I wish I could go back there and talk to them, but like, are we really dealing with osteoarthritis here? Are we really dealing with joint breakdown? Or you're talking to me about you have a past where you have quite a lot of allergic symptoms coming and going. You have a past where you have skin stuff. You have a past that includes living in water damaged buildings. There are many, many pieces that I look back on, and I'm like, okay, was that an autoimmune type of pain that we were dealing with there? And we were just treating it as an osteoarthritis that was stubborn. That was just, well, you're not doing the right things. You're not exercising enough, like your lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe there's more to it than that. So that was my interest professionally. And it merged very interestingly with my personal journey too, because when I went on LDN, it was quite fascinating to see pain that I had been treated for decades. Like, my knees are a good example. I've dislocated my knees many dozens of times, and I've definitely chronic pain from the joint wear and tear. My chronic knee pain, which would have been totally described as OA, there's evidence that there is joint wear and tear, joint breakdown on the MRIs. That pain has been reduced as well with the LDN. So I do find it very, very fascinating.
You didn't mention diet. Did you change your diet?
Diet is massively changed. However, if you're asking if diet change was potentially a precipitator to the increased benefit from the LDN, I would say we adjusted diet quite a bit before LDN, but diet has been a massive component for us. I'd say even before we knew about the mold and the MCAS, we were following a pretty, I won't say strict, but we all did best, including my 2 children, on what we'd call an autoimmune paleo diet. So very clean meats, higher fat, very, very healthy grass-fed proteins, lots of vegetables, limited sugar and nightshades, all of that kind of thing. But then when the MCAS hit, we just absolutely got blasted with histamine intolerance, and it crept up and hit all of us. And so changing and adjusting to a low histamine diet, that was a pretty big adjustment because our autoimmune paleo diet was actually quite high histamine, like all the fermented foods and all the stuff that's supposed to be good for you. It definitely ended up hurting us quite a bit. So yeah, diet has been massive. And I would go so far as to say, like, we wouldn't be okay. Like, it's essential right now. It's definitely a symptom game changer for us. And it's interesting with the histamine piece of it, it definitely either is or mimics the autoimmune type joint pain that the LDN works on. So for all of us in the family, joint pain is a piece of the histamine intolerance. For my two daughters, definitely the histamine part of it, it just kind of really affects their guts and their intestinal health and that piece of it as well. But the LDN has worked for both of them to either mitigate the histamine portion of it or just autoimmune in general.
If you had to rate your quality of life on a score of 1 to 10 before you started LDN, what would it have been?
Like, on my best day, a 2 out of 10, like best day, like very, very, very low.
Wow, if that was the best day.
Yeah, no, we were pretty down and out. Yeah, it was pretty wild to look back on those earlier days.
Oh, and what about now?
I would say I have work to do. I would say on my better days, I can get to 5 or 6 out of 10. And that's with all of the treatment and the therapy and the medication and the lifestyle modification. But like with all of those things and prior to the LDN and also the sodium cromolyn, yeah, a 2 was my best day. So yeah.
And now the best day is a 5?
5 or 6. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say up to 6. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Good.
And more to come.
What would you say to other people who are following in your footsteps, who have a similar journey and haven't yet managed to find what works for them?
It's funny. I was actually listening to a Dr. Afrin chat this morning on the podcast, and I totally really align with his viewpoint of go low, go slow, go methodical, and I have to keep track of the 4 of us in our family, like the amount of documentation that I have had to write down about, okay, this medication seems to have these symptoms. This medication seems to have these symptoms. Like, be very methodical with what is happening when you try something new. What is happening when you introduce a food? This reaction happened. What immediately precipitated it? And so, like, for all of us in the family, I don't have separate journals. I wish I were that organized, but we definitely have very organized lists as far as, okay, what is happening when we introduce this new thing, both positive or negative? And to be honest, it does start with a baseline of be in a healthy space, because you can't figure out reactions if you're in a space that is unsafe, like a moldy space, a dangerous space, something where you don't have access to clean air and fresh water. So that was pretty essential for us. But at the end of the day, once you're safe, go low, go slow, and pay attention to what's happening when you introduce new things, and like keep a record of it. It really, really did help. And we started making very obvious connections very quickly. All of us are reacting to tomatoes. All of us are reacting to leftovers. When we could eat something yesterday, we eat the same thing today. We're not okay. So like, keep very good track of what's going on and really try to cultivate an understanding of what's going on inside your body. I think MCAS can really cause a big disconnect, and like, I'm reacting to everything all the time. Well, okay, let's break it down and take each thing very individually, and then don't just notice the bad things. That's another thing that I've come full circle. You tend to just want to notice symptoms, like, oh, I'm feeling horrible joint pain, awful headache, noise light sensitivity. This was my trigger. Okay. But but you also have to notice, oh, when I'm in this environment, I feel great. Okay, I tried LDN and my joint pain, it might have been a bit too much of a jump, but my sleep got quite significantly better. Oh, I tried this new antihistamine and my anxiety came down. So notice the good stuff too. And then notice what precipitated. I had a really good day. What did I do today? What did I do yesterday? So that's the other thing. It just can't be all symptoms and negative. Like notice your triggers and notice what is helping you. And LDN, it was such a massive, like okay, this is helping all of you and really quickly. So yeah.
So meal times must be tricky if you all can't eat the same foods.
It is, I will say it is quite challenging. My two biggest complaints are the leftovers thing. When you have a family, when you have kids and you can't eat leftovers, that's been very challenging. And the youngest is extremely histamine intolerant and also seems to have a number of other food allergies. So working with diet is definitely, it's been one of the trickiest things because whatever variety of MCAS we seem to have, it seems to be very gut, like that is a very consistent symptom for all of us. So it's constantly kind of an experimentation process. We've definitely got to the point where like, okay, we're very sure these number of things aggravate. And especially over the next 6 to 12 months, that's pretty big in my sights is, okay, how do we deal with making progress with the histamine intolerance? We're not going backwards now, we're going forwards. So.
Well, we wish you and your family every success. I mean, you've obviously come such a long way. It's amazing.
Yes. That's also like, I would absolutely say that as well. Like, I'm not a journaler, but I wish I would have been throughout this whole process. Like they talk about the sawtooth graph of recovery in pandas. I really think that is a thing in MCAS as well. And like, look back, find the good, find how far you've come. And when you're having these horrible days, you've had tons of monster reactions. You're like, why isn't the medication working like it normally does? No, reflect back. You will have come farther than you think you have. And that's pieces to hold on to.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
I'm Dr. Leonard Weinstock. The guy who's been prescribing LDN since 2005, and I've seen the wonders. And I keep on seeing them, especially in hard-to-diagnose conditions. They're not that hard to do, but once you know about mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you'll find that 17% of your friends or relatives have one or more of these conditions, and you can help them. We're making a documentary to wake up the medical community, to educate the population, but we need funding. So please fund whatever you can afford, no matter how little. www.mcasfund.com. That's mcasfund.com.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.